Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this year's The Arts and Society Conference. My name is Bernie Taylor, and I explore mankind's creative and intellectual origins. This presentation, Picasso and the Lost Art of Pareidolia, takes us to a deep root of mankind's creative capacity and perhaps what truly makes us human. Sometime in our distant past, we were like chimpanzee. In that time, our brains were wired differently, and none of us were able to peer into rock faces, gaze at the clouds, and look up to the night sky to find meaning in what is not there. At some point in our mental development, we found the ability to see what our mind creates from scattered pieces of incomplete information. Pareidolia became part of our consciousness and was expressed on many mediums. Here is a scene from the Lascaux cave in France, where red deer are swimming across a river. The natural shape of the wall forms the flow of water. Note how the heads of the deer bob up and down. This river is presumably the Vizier outside the cave and depicts when red deer are crossing in the autumn, as evidenced by their full antler sets. The inner cave is a reflection of the artist's terrestrial realm. Near to the Strait of Gibraltar at Gorham's Cave, we find this panel dating to about 36,000 years ago. The pictured Gorham etching is roughly the size of 2 A4 pieces of paper and sits on a coffee table-like platform 40 centimeters above the bedrock. This image has been described as the first abstract art of Neanderthals. Is this abstract art or the reproduction of pareidolia? The Gorham etching has many of the same lines as Mulhacén, which is the highest peak on the Iberian Peninsula. Let us take a closer look to compare the horizontal and vertical lines on each. Note the natural irregularity in the mountain that the Gorham's etching artist captured. This section has the look of an agitated horse. This is pareidolia. The artist used 2 of the horizontal lines on Mulhacén to create this other agitated horse. The inner cave is again a reflection of the cave artist's terrestrial realm. The size of the Gorham etching indicates that the artist scaled the work with 2 hands, those same 2 hands that fit in the grooves as pictured on the lower image. Note the metacarpals on the upper hand. I believe that the artist also used his hands for a gesture language that depicted animals. Both the mare and the hand gesture are pareidolia, created in the mind of the artist. Other than the natural irregularities on the face of Mulhacén, none of this is really there. For reference, the current walking distance between Gorham's Cave and Mulhacén is 300 kilometers and would take about a week to span. Let us travel eastward to Grotte Chauvet on the Ardèche River in France. The Chauvet cave was first inhabited by humans about 33,000 years ago. Here we see the panel of the dotted animal that closely resembles the nearby Pont d'Arc. We again find that the inner cave is a reflection of the cave artist's terrestrial realm. Above the red disc, we find faces. The upper 2 at G and H appear to be of a man and a boy. Perhaps the pair are a teacher and his apprentice sitting on top of the Pont d'Arc or projected among the stars. Below them at B, we find an unusual long 4-headed spiritual character, which is over what appears to be a bull at sea. These may be some of the oldest images we have of human faces. Did they originate in pareidolia, made by the hand of man, or a little of both? What animal might have been pictured on the panel? My interpretation is that there may be a number of animals that overlap each other. Here is a horse that uses some of the same natural irregularities or man-made features in the wall, as marked by the red arrows. These features may have been on Pont d'Arc in the same time of the Upper Paleolithic artists. We can see the human faces again as marked by the blue arrows on the viewer's upper left. Return to the north of Spain in the Cantabria region to enter the Altamira cave. Images in this cave have been dated to about 35,000 years ago. Here the Altamira artists found natural irregularities in the rock and accentuated the faces with black to give them the appearance of horses. This is another view of the same Altamira characters in a different light. You may have seen these 2 Altamira characters on the viewer's right in this Mutt's cartoon. They are more famous from Picasso's 1907 Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, where we can see almost identical characters. This interpretation may make me an art history rebel. I believe Picasso would have appreciated my counter perspective. Picasso's words may give us more clues to his borrowing from Altamira for his characters in Les Demoiselles d'Avignon and the origins of art. The Spanish artist was quoted as saying, "It occurred to man to create his own images. It's because he discovered them in the world around him, almost formed, already within his grasp. He saw them in a bone, in the irregular surfaces of cavern walls, in a piece of wood. One form might suggest a woman, another a bison." Picasso is speaking of the pareidolia phenomenon as the instigator of art. The more common perspective is that Picasso's Altamira inspiration came from African masks, whereas my account of Picasso's Altamira inspiration for Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is supported by Picasso's photographer Brossi, who said that the birth of Cubism owed nothing to African fetishes that he himself had seen. African sculptures came only after he had completed the canvas. It is partly coincidental that what has wrongly been called his Negro period corresponded to the time when he discovered African statues and masks. When asked, were you yourself directly influenced by Negro art, as people often claimed, Picasso responded, no, definitely not, but the discovery of the sculpture coincided at the same time with the kind of thing we were searching for. One direction to ascertain the style in Les Demoiselles d'Avignon comes from Picasso's friend Max Jacob, who noted, Picasso started some large figures. With nose attached to the eyes, he became absorbed in a profound meditation, simplifying animals and things, and arriving at a single stroke at drawings of a sort that recall prehistoric cave paintings. Picasso appears to have been intrigued by Upper Paleolithic cave art. The 2016 movie Finding Altamira, starring Antonio Banderas as Picasso, closes with two quotes that are proposed to be from Picasso. After Altamira, all is decadence, that he was alleged to have said after being asked to investigate the authenticity of the Altamira cave art in the early 1900s. And we have invented nothing, which Picasso was reported to have said after he left the French cave of Lascaux in the 1940s. I first noticed these Upper Paleolithic characters in the French anthropologist André Louis Gorham's 1960 book, Treasures of Prehistoric Art. Gorham's images do not have the flash shadows around the central character, which Picasso found to be hair. These images were not Picasso's source. Note that there are 3 masks from Altamira in Gorham's book. Picasso borrowed the 3rd character for his 1939 painting, Night Fishing at Antibes. What Picasso is trying to tell us with this Altamira character is unclear. Picasso borrowed from Grotte de Pair-non-Pair for his 1936 painting, Curtain Design for Romain Rolland's play Les Fortunes Juliette. Note the long beak, strong breasts, large fingers, and odd feet on the shamanic bird-man characters. We can compare the original panel to my outlined masked birdman character. The mask is most representative of a griffin vulture. We can compare the original panel to a drawing by the French archaeologist Abbé Henri Barrel, and from whom prehistory was once decided. The Abbé appears to have missed a few lines, or perhaps that the Abbé only recorded lines that he believed were created by the hand of man and excluded everything else. Note that the masked birdman shamanic character merges with the lower horse, becoming what the ancient Greeks would have interpreted as a centaur. Picasso was fond of mythical beings and incorporating them in his art. The lines in this centaur give us just about enough information to form the character in our minds. These lines have the look of Upper Paleolithic cave art as described by his friend Max Jacob. We shift now to Guernica, where Picasso appears to have borrowed one of the horses from the French Grotte de Pair-non-Pair. I'm being generous with the word borrowing. Here in Guernica, we can see the overlapping of the bull and upper horse. This is a distinctive Upper Paleolithic style. Note that the ear of a bull is not upright. Picasso does it again with his 1938 still life with candle palette and black bull's head. Note that the ear and right eye of the bull are correctly positioned, as are the left eye and ear of the horse. When asked about the identity of the bull, Picasso said, the bull is brutality and darkness. Who was most emblematic of brutality and darkness in Picasso's time and place? It was clearly General Franco, whose large forehead has some resemblance to the Guernica bull. Picasso introduces metaphors in characterized features. As we move down the viewer's left side of the panel, we are seeing a wailing woman who holds a so-called dead child with unusually short legs. The face looks older than that of a child and suggests Benito Mussolini with a piggish nose. Picasso is again developing characters from pieces of other forms. My read on the dead child is that the short legs are a vertically trimmed mustache and that the triangle above it represents a wide nose. The fingernails above the wide nose are the eyes. The head of the dead child is that of Mussolini, and the body is a caricature of someone else. I believe that the bull metaphorically represents General Franco, who started the Spanish Civil War, that the face of the dead child is his sidekick, Italy's Benito Mussolini. Along with the wide-nosed man with the narrow mustache on the dead child, who likely represents a German whose name Picasso would not have wanted stated, this side of Guernica portrays the fascist or far right. The central horse would then represent the Spanish people, which Picasso confirmed. For this political theory to be correct, there must also be a far-left communist influence. We will return to this idea shortly. We now turn to the so-called fallen hero on the bottom of the image, who lays supine with a broken sword and an outstretched left arm. Look to his eyes. They are open and peering in different directions. This is not a battle injury. Picasso may be projecting different perspectives. Is Picasso projecting the battles between the matador and bull that he was so fond of, or is the fallen hero's relationship with the bull tied to the constellations Orion and Taurus, who battle through the night sky, this battle that never was but always will be? Guernica may be about all wars, with real and imagined heroes and villains, some of which are projected from pareidolia by the human mind. There appears to be a character at the bottom of the panel as the hand of the fallen hero. Picasso is giving us hints for us to connect the lines. I believe that the hand of the hero is a dog's head. See the upward eyes and the large nose? The current popular opinion is that the hero's hand was inspired by a glove. We may learn more about the idea of a dog hand on Gorham's etching at Gibraltar. On the top of this panel, we find engraved dogs. The image to the viewer's left has them outlined. The two larger canids are about the size of the thumb of your hand. The dogs on the Gorham etching are on the hand of this odd monstrous character. They give him the strong-jawed grasp of dogs. In his left hand, the character holds a lionish-looking boy. See how the artist used the natural horizontal lines in Mulhacén to form the waist and diagonal lines to shape the upper arm. This odd character also overlaps with the Gorham Mare to become a centaur. This tradition in the Gorham etching was passed down to the Grotte de Pair-non-Pair artists some 11,000 years later. As suggested earlier, if there is a fascist far right portrayed on Guernica, there must also be a communist far left. Let's look at the woman on the viewer's far right with her hands raised. The screaming woman closely resembles Picasso's estranged Russian wife Olga, who was formerly a ballerina. Note the distinctive chins on the two characters. Both are portrayed with theatrical stances. The Guernica woman screams from what appears to be a barrel or a burning structure. Maybe there can be another perspective. Let us take a closer look. I believe the character is a brown bear with an outstretched arm. See the toes at the end. That would then be the Russian bear, the Soviet communists who fanned the flames of the conflict, as represented on the far left of the painting. Picasso gives us hints of the bear's body parts so that we can fill in the rest for ourselves as if the image is found in pareidolia. Is Picasso testing us or showing off his skills of perception? Perhaps the style is a little of both. With the fascists on the far right, the Soviet communists on the far left, and the central horse in the crossfire representing the people, we can see the political struggle of Europe in this image. Not just the Spanish Civil War, but the many worldwide political conflicts between the two extremes. Through Guernica, Picasso asks us at what cost on the people should the ideologies of extremists be entertained. This is a question we grapple with in our present time. This was the mirrored vision Picasso would have found from the roof of his Paris flat shortly after dusk the night following the attack on the civilian town of Guernica. The Spanish artist might have looked towards the town of Guernica to see any bomb flashes, yet the distance would have been too far. Picasso would have also seen the constellations Orion and Taurus, the bull, on one side of the night, and Ursa Major as the Russian bear on the other. The Upper Paleolithic characters from the caves, the pareidolia we find in the night sky, and the human-created terrestrial chaos are a mirror of one another. In Guernica, this was Picasso's cosmos in that time and place. Picasso was known for many talents. We can add observational astronomy to the list. We find a cosmological awareness in our hero depicted in Gorham's cave. The bright star Sirius is designated behind both Orion characters. Sirius is an actual star on the flank of the dog at his rear. Like Picasso's vision of Guernica, the inner cave is a reflection of both the terrestrial and stellar realms. They are the cave artist's cosmos. Picasso was an armchair psychologist of sorts, and also reflective of the human artistic experience. Picasso said, "It is not sufficient to know an artist's works. It is also necessary to know when he did them, why, how, under what circumstances. Someday there will undoubtedly be a science. It may be called the science of man, which will seek to learn more about man in general through the study of creative man. I often think about such a science, and I want to leave to posterity a documentation that will be as complete as possible. That's why I put a date on everything I do." In his Science of Man, Picasso may have considered if we are the wise species of sapiens, or do we just make up things in our heads from scattered pieces of information. The ability to conceptualize his Science of Man may even be what truly makes us human. And with all the secrets that Picasso carried with him in life, what might have been his final thoughts? What feelings did he take with him in that very end? What did those big black eyes that stared to the camera see when faced with his own mortal death? Our answers may lie in his body of work. Inspired by the lost art of pareidolia among those natural cracks and rocks, the monstrous merging of human and animal beings, and the brilliant lights of distant suns from across the universe that illuminated his visions. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak at this year's conference. More in my work can be found on these sites. I am always open to cooperate on projects and virtually present my work to community and academic audiences.